Beyond the Gates spoilers for next week, August 18th to 22nd, 2025, tease that next week will draw each character into a web of confrontations, betrayals, and painful revelations that will reshape the Dupree family and everyone around them. From the moment Peaches reveals Leslie is Vernon's daughter, the ground beneath the characters has shifted, and the tremors have only gotten stronger. The consequences spread like a shockwave, hitting Anita, Chelsea, Ashley, and the others in ways none of them could have anticipated, each twist pushing them closer to the breaking point. Leslie, always someone simmering with a quiet resentment over being dismissed, overlooked, or patronized, finds herself suddenly armed with a truth that transforms her position in the family. Instead of hiding in shame or confusion, she embraces it with a kind of arrogance that borders on reckless. Peach's revelation feels like the key to every locked door that stood in Leslie's way, and she seizes it with relish. The arrogance isn't just about her bloodline, it's about finally having leverage, the validation she has long craved. Her first instinct, surprisingly, is to seek out Anita. To Eva, watching from the sidelines, this choice is shocking. Anita has humiliated Leslie countless times, whether through sharp remarks, icy dismissals, or outright confrontations that left Leslie smoldering with humiliation. Yet now, Leslie sees Anita not as an adversary to avoid, but as the perfect canvas upon which to paint her newfound superiority. When Leslie approaches Anita, it is with a deliberate cruelty. She doesn't come in rage, she comes smiling, savoring every second. She basks in the ability to get under Anita's skin simply by existing with the truth on her side. Every word is chosen to sting, to remind Anita that the tables have turned. Where once Leslie was an outsider, now she stands at the center of the storm, with Vernon's blood running through her veins, and that fact alone allows her to wield a power she never had before. The gleam in her eyes reveals not only the thrill of revenge, but also the intoxication of finally mattering. Anita, of course, is not someone easily rattled, but even she cannot deny that this revelation complicates everything. The Dupree family is no longer what it seemed, and Leslie, rather than feeling crushed by the weight of that truth, revels in it. Meanwhile, across town, Chelsea is dealing with a storm of her own, one that takes a darker turn than Leslie's gloating. Fresh from celebrating with Kat, basking in the satisfaction of a plan that seemed to finally fall into place, Chelsea experiences a betrayal of safety so swift it leaves her vulnerable in a way she hasn't been in years. Kat leaves the room, light-hearted, while Chelsea, still smiling, suddenly feels the world tilt. The sensation of dizziness is not from champagne or excitement, it's chemical. By the time she realizes what's happening, it's too late. The drug takes hold, dragging her into unconsciousness, and her body crumples. The fans have guessed the culprit already, and the hints are impossible to ignore. Allison, Chelsea's ex, has never truly let go. Where Chelsea saw a closed door, Allison saw a wound that refused to heal. Obsessed, consumed, and desperate, Allison crosses a line that cannot be uncrossed. By the time Chelsea's body slumps into silence, the sense of dread is undeniable. The crime is intimate, personal, and laced with obsession. This isn't random violence, it's the manifestation of a toxic love that Chelsea fought to escape. As the night swallows her screams, the audience is left on edge, knowing Chelsea's battle has only just begun, and it is not the kind of fight one can win with clever plans or sharp words. Elsewhere, Ashley collides with the past in a way she never anticipated. Derek's sudden hospitalization creates a swirl of fear and urgency, but it also brings someone back into her orbit, Andre. The circumstances are raw, stripped of the walls Ashley usually builds to protect herself. In the sterile, tense environment of a hospital, there is no room for pretense. Andre, walking in, doesn't just see Derek in the hospital bed, sees Ashley's reaction to him, a reaction layered with history, unspoken pain, and perhaps even longing. She is not icy, not dismissive, but something else entirely, something Andre hadn't expected. For him, it is both shocking and disarming. For her, it is dangerous, because those emotions she thought she buried begin to stir. Nicole, meanwhile, is trying to get ahead of the storm. She has something to tell Kat, something she believes is important enough to demand her full attention. Yet, in her determination to push forward, she overlooks the chaos brewing in Anita's home, where Leslie is wreaking havoc with gleeful abandon. Nicole, preoccupied with her own mission, underestimates the ripple effect Leslie is creating. The omission will cost her, because ignoring Leslie's rampage means allowing tensions to escalate unchecked. And then there's Vernon, the man at the center of it all, whose sins have resurfaced in ways he can no longer control. His call to Bill reeks of desperation. Vernon doesn't ask for help lightly. He demands it when cornered, when the walls are closing in. Bill, however, is not immediately available. He is entangled in his own struggles, his own priorities, and Vernon's pleas, though urgent, are forced to wait. The excuse Bill offered that he has a matter with a difficult client is brushed off by Vernon at first, but the audience knows better. That client might very well be connected to Vanessa, whose cryptic remarks about someone troublesome hang heavy over the storyline. Bill's delays are not mere scheduling issues. They're part of a deeper knot of obligations and conflicts that threaten to pull him apart. Ted's presence only thickens the tension. His need for Bill's legal expertise comes not from Vernon's crisis, but from his own, a looming divorce from Nicole. The courtroom battle looms like a storm cloud, and Ted, though trying to keep his composure, knows he is outmatched without Bill's counsel. This triangulation, Vernon begging for help, Ted demanding support, and Bill caught in the middle, creates a tangle of loyalties that can only snap under pressure. Danny, the quiet observer with a sharp eye, becomes a messenger in this unfolding chaos. She receives Anita's updates about Leslie's antics and immediately passes them to Naomi. The act seems small, almost routine, but it cements Danny's role as the thread connecting people who might otherwise drift apart in the confusion. Her updates don't just keep Naomi informed, they shape how Naomi perceives the entire situation, tilting her understanding of who is winning and who is losing in this dangerous game. All of this coalesces into a single truth: the Dupree family is unraveling. Leslie's identity isn't a secret to be managed, it is a weapon that cuts into every relationship, every fragile bond. Anita is left fighting not just to keep her composure, but to protect her home from Leslie's deliberate provocation. Chelsea is in physical danger, betrayed by someone she once loved. Ashley is standing on the edge of old emotions she thought she had buried. Nicole is miscalculating, distracted by her own priorities. Vernon is reduced to begging, his control slipping. Bill is stretched thin while Ted prepares for war. Danny and Naomi watch from the sidelines, piecing together the picture of a family in freefall. Each storyline feeds into the other, not as separate threads, but as strands of the same knot tightening around the characters' throats. The crisis is not a single event, it is a cascade, each revelation fueling the next, each choice pushing someone closer to ruin. And as the days stretch from August 18th to August 22nd, the promise is clear: no one will escape untouched. Under the suffocating weight of revelations and betrayals, the storm that began with Leslie's arrogance only grows darker. The fragile balance holding together each life begins to splinter further as secrets evolve into weapons and choices harden into consequences. What was once mere disruption now transforms into a war of position, where every move is calculated to claim victory, even if it leaves devastation in its wake. Leslie, emboldened after her confrontations, becomes more reckless in her pursuit of dominance. The arrogance that began as a thrill transforms into a pattern of behavior that poisons every room she enters. Anita is her favorite target, but Leslie doesn't stop there. She begins parading her status in front of anyone willing to listen, cultivating an audience that feeds her inflated sense of power. Yet the intoxication of newfound importance blinds her to the reality that arrogance is not the same as strength. While she revels in Anita's frustration, she fails to notice that Anita is not merely suffering in silence. She is observing, calculating, waiting for her moment to strike back. Anita's pride won't allow Leslie's cruelty to go unanswered, and every jab Leslie throws only sharpens Anita's resolve. The growing chaos spills outward when Chelsea's disappearance is finally noticed. Kat, unaware of what happened after she left, becomes one of the first to question why Chelsea is suddenly unreachable. The celebration that had seemed so joyful hours before is now laced with dread. Allison's shadow hovers over everything, her obsession with Chelsea growing more visible to anyone paying attention. When Allison reappears in subtle, unnerving ways lingering outside familiar places, showing up with questions nobody invited, suspicion hardens into fear. The audience understands what Kat only begins to piece together. Chelsea is in real danger, trapped in Allison's twisted narrative of love and possession. Each hour that passes raises the stakes, turning what seemed like an unsettling act into a life-and-death struggle. Ashley, meanwhile, is thrown into turmoil she cannot easily explain. Her interaction with Andre at the hospital reawakens emotions she had buried beneath layers of bitterness and denial. Derek's hospitalization should have been her only focus, but Andre's presence forces her to confront unfinished business. Andre notices her hesitation, the flickers of something softer in her demeanor, and though he doesn't press, his mere existence destabilizes her. Ashley is torn between loyalty to Derek, whose condition has rattled her deeply, and the unresolved feelings that Andre pulls to the surface. The hospital, meant to be a place of healing, becomes the stage for emotional fractures that threaten to break open further. Nicole's oversight in ignoring Leslie's havoc grows into a costly mistake. As Leslie's provocations escalate, Nicole's attempt to keep Kat focused on her own matters feels increasingly tone-deaf. The duplicity of trying to manage priorities while dismissing Anita's struggle leaves Nicole vulnerable. The people around her start to see her as disconnected, almost careless, and her credibility weakens. Meanwhile, Kat's attention begins to shift away from Nicole's warnings, pulled instead toward Chelsea's sudden disappearance. Nicole's voice, once commanding, now feels less persuasive, drowned out by louder alarms. Vernon's desperation intensifies. His call to Bill was not a single plead, was the opening of a floodgate. Each day, he grows more insistent, more erratic, as if saving face is no longer possible and only survival matters. Bill, stretched between Vernon's crisis and Ted's looming divorce battle, finds himself cornered. Vanessa's mention of a difficult client grows heavier by the hour, hinting that Bill's entanglements extend far beyond what anyone suspects. The line between professional obligation and personal ruin blurs, and the stress of managing conflicting demands threatens to collapse everything he has built. Ted's resolve to end his marriage to Nicole gains momentum. His request for Bill's counsel is not casual, it's the backbone of his strategy. He knows Nicole's sharpness in a courtroom, knows her ability to twist narratives to her advantage, and without Bill, he risks being dismantled piece by piece. The prospect of the divorce trial becomes a subplot that mirrors the larger chaos: loyalty tested, alliances demanded, survival at stake. Ted doesn't just want freedom, he wants vindication. The more Nicole underestimates him, the more determined he becomes to turn the tables. In the midst of this unraveling, Danny continues her quiet but pivotal role. By keeping Naomi updated on Anita's troubles with Leslie, she cements her position as the eyes and ears behind the curtain. Naomi, fueled by Danny's updates, begins to see the Dupree family implosion not just as drama but as an opportunity. Every detail Danny shares adds another piece to the puzzle Naomi is assembling. Together, they track the patterns, watching as pride, obsession, desperation, and betrayal weave a narrative that seems destined to implode. The tension between Leslie and Anita reaches a boiling point when Leslie takes her provocations too far, crossing into Anita's personal sanctuaries with deliberate malice. She thrives on the gasps, the clenched jaws, the whispered conversations that follow her stunts, convinced that fear and frustration are proof of her power. But Anita is no longer content to endure. She begins to strategize quietly, determined to expose Leslie's weaknesses in front of the very people she wants to impress. Anita's retaliation is not loud but precise, a calculated effort to undermine Leslie's grandstanding and remind everyone that arrogance, without substance, always crumbles. Chelsea's captivity under Allison deepens into a nightmare that strips away every illusion of control. Allison doesn't see herself as a villain, but as a savior, convinced that this forced intimacy is a way to heal Chelsea from the betrayal of moving on. The lines Allison speaks are chilling in their sincerity, dripping with delusion. Chelsea, groggy from drugs, begins to understand that reasoning with Allison is useless. Survival demands cunning, manipulation of her own, and the patience to outlast her captor's unpredictable moods. Kat's growing suspicion and attempts to find Chelsea may be her only lifeline, but with Allison lurking in the shadows, every move becomes dangerous. Andre, shaken by Ashley's reaction at the hospital, begins to re-examine his own feelings. The history between them is complicated, tangled with regrets and missed opportunities. He wonders if Derek's vulnerability has softened Ashley enough to rekindle something between them. Yet Andre also knows that pursuing her now could destroy more than it heals. His silence becomes its own form of tension, leaving Ashley to wrestle with emotions she can no longer ignore. Bill finds himself at a crossroads, unable to fully support Vernon, unable to fully commit to Ted, and yet unable to walk away from either. Vanessa's warnings echo louder, suggesting that his choices in the coming days will determine not only the outcome of Vernon's and Ted's battles, but his own survival. The pressures mount, and Bill's carefully cultivated control begins to slip. The Dupree family, once proud, now drowns in crisis. Leslie clings to her arrogance as though it were armor. Anita sharpens her knives in silence. Chelsea fights for her life against the obsessive grip of her past. Ashley teeters between loyalty and temptation. Nicole loses her grip on influence while Kat's focus shifts to a search that could end in tragedy. Vernon spirals into desperation, Ted prepares for war, and Bill threatens to collapse under the weight of too many demands. Danny and Naomi, watching, recording, and analyzing, see the unraveling for what it is, not the end of a chapter, but the beginning of a collapse that no one will walk away from unscathed. The stage is set for revelations that cannot be undone, for confrontations that will shatter illusions, and for choices that demand sacrifices no one is ready to make. Every character stands on the edge, and the next move will determine who rises from the ashes and who is buried beneath them. The crescendo of tension reaches a point where silence is no longer possible. Every suppressed emotion, every hidden motive, and every act of manipulation now bursts into the open, pulling the characters into their inevitable confrontations. What began as subtle provocations and desperate maneuvers becomes outright war, leaving no room for half measures. Leslie's reign of arrogance collapses under the weight of her own hubris. For weeks, she has paraded her identity as Vernon's daughter like a crown, expecting fear and respect, but Anita finally executes her quiet plan. In front of the very crowd Leslie had courted, faces she believed were dazzled by her sudden elevation, Anita reveals the cracks in Leslie's story. She points not only to Leslie's recklessness, but to the hollowness of her claim, reminding everyone that blood alone cannot grant authority or respect. Anita's words cut sharper than knives, exposing Leslie's bluster as nothing more than insecurity dressed in bravado. The humiliation is brutal, and for the first time since Peach's revelation, Leslie falters. Her arrogance turns into desperation, her smirk replaced by the frantic eyes of someone who has lost control. The audience feels the sting of her downfall, and yet also the tragedy. Leslie's desperate need to belong has consumed her entirely, and in trying to rise, she has only sunk deeper. Chelsea's ordeal under Allison spirals into its final act. Trapped, weakened, and terrified, Chelsea begins to feign compliance, offering Allison false reassurances of love and devotion to gain her trust. The charade works just long enough to give Chelsea a window of opportunity. When Allison, convinced she has finally won, lowers her guard, Chelsea strikes with a raw, desperate strength that comes not from confidence, but from sheer survival. The struggle is violent, messy, and heart-pounding, ending with Chelsea stumbling into the night, battered but alive. Kat, who has been piecing together the truth, finds her just as she collapses, and the reunion is both heartbreaking and triumphant. Yet the shadow of Allison remains, whether captured or still at large. Her presence haunts Chelsea's recovery, leaving scars far deeper than the bruises on her skin. Ashley and Andre's unresolved emotions ignite in the aftermath of Derek's hospitalization. The vulnerability of the moment forces Ashley to admit the truth. Her anger toward Andre was always a mask for love that never truly died. Derek, recovering but still fragile, senses the shift. His realization is devastating, and though he tries to fight it, the reality is unavoidable. Ashley cannot remain by his side when her heart is already moving toward someone else. The triangle ends not with explosive betrayal, but with quiet heartbreak. Derek left to face his recovery alone, while Ashley and Andre, hesitant but drawn together, step into uncertain territory. Their story is not tied with a neat bow but left raw, jagged, and painfully human. Nicole and Ted's divorce trial delivers the fireworks everyone expected. Nicole storms into the courtroom with the same confidence she has carried for years, but Ted, armed with Bill's counsel, proves more formidable than she anticipated. Every attempt by Nicole to twist the narrative is countered with precision. Ted doesn't just survive, he begins to win. The victory is not total. Nicole remains sharp and unrelenting, but the cracks in her dominance show for the first time. When the gavel falls, both walk away scarred, their marriage reduced to ashes, but Ted carries the faint glow of vindication, a man finally stepping out from Nicole's shadow. Nicole, however, does not accept defeat lightly. Her eyes promise that this battle may be over, but the war between them is far from done. Vernon's spiral ends in tragedy. Unable to regain control, rejected by those he once commanded, and suffocated by his past mistakes, he reaches for one last act of desperation. His final confrontation with Bill is raw and unfiltered, Vernon demanding salvation while Bill, exhausted and cornered, can only offer the truth. There is nothing left to save. The collapse is complete. Vernon, once the patriarch whose secrets set everything in motion, becomes a broken man, a shadow of his former self. His fall underscores the central truth of the story: power built on lies and manipulation cannot endure. Danny and Naomi, the watchers on the periphery, close the chapter not with triumph but with clarity. Their updates, their observations, and their whispered conversations have given them a vantage point above the chaos, and now they see the full picture. The Dupree family is shattered, its legacy poisoned. Naomi, with Danny at her side, begins to plot what comes next, not as bystanders, but as players who have learned from the mistakes of those who fell before them. They understand that survival in this world requires not arrogance, not obsession, not desperate clinging, but patience and precision. In the ruins of others' lives, they find the blueprint for their own ascent. The conclusion is not clean, because the world these characters inhabit never allows for clean endings. Leslie remains adrift, wounded by humiliation yet still hungry for recognition. Chelsea, safe but scarred, begins a long recovery haunted by Allison's shadow. Ashley and Andre step tentatively into a fragile second chance, even as Derek nurses a broken heart. Nicole and Ted walk away from each other, their bond dissolved into bitterness, each already plotting their next move. Vernon fades, a cautionary tale rather than a victor. Bill survives, but carries the heavy weight of choices that have fractured his life. Danny and Naomi stand ready, eyes wide open, prepared to seize the opportunities left behind. The story closes on an image of fractures, a family that once seemed unshakable now scattered in pieces, each character carrying the wounds of battle. Yet within those fractures lies the promise of new beginnings, darker battles, and futures that remain uncertain. The gates that once held them all together have been torn wide open, and what lies beyond is a landscape of both ruin and possibility. The end is not peace, it is the beginning of a new war, one forged in the ashes of pride, obsession, and betrayal.